Welcome everyone to our webinar on being liked doesn't win deals. We are expecting a large crowd today, and so while we are waiting for folks to join on Zoom, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded and all registrants will get that recording this afternoon by email. And we do have some time at the end for questions. However, we are happy to take them as we go. So if you have a question as we're going along, please feel free to enter that into the Q&A box. We'll try to get to those as we are talking about our topics today. And if not, we'll address those at the end. So let's dive in. Again, we've got a great topic for you today. Being liked doesn't win deals, and we're going to tell you what does. This is a topic that we've heard quite a bit about from organizations that we've been talking to. We're hearing that they think they have great relationships in their accounts. However, they're losing deals. And for many of you, you're fielding difficult conversations around inflation, around shipping or delivery delays, product availability issues, and you're struggling to hold those relationships together even on your existing orders. So when we dig deeper with organizations, we find often that they are trying to equate likability with trust in those relationships. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between being liked and being trusted, and then how to build that relationship. So I want to introduce to you my co-host. Again, my name is Michelle Richardson. I am the Vice President of Sales Performance Research here at the Brooks Group. And if you're looking at this slide and you see a picture of Dan Markin and you're thinking, wait a minute, Russ Scherer was on the registration. So Russ was supposed to be here. He is unexpectedly not available today. He is victim to that current, shall we say, pandemic of canceled flights. So he is somewhere in the air in the US. His flight was canceled yesterday. He's been rebooked. So we have a surprise, a great surprise for you with Dan Markin. Dan Markin is our Director of Facilitator and Coaching Excellence. He has more than 20 years of experience in B2B sales and leadership. And many of you who are out there today are potentially friends of the Brooks Group, know Dan, rely on his experience and expertise. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Michelle.
And we're going to dig into this topic today. We're going to talk about trust, why it's critical, how to build it. But first, we're going to look at 2022 views from the field. So, you know, we like to bring you some data in these webinars. So let's take a look at what you all are telling us about this topic. So we wanted to find out, again, we're talking about being liked doesn't win deals. So how important is it to be liked in your customer relationships? So we asked, how important is it to be liked by your customer or prospect in the sales process? And these are the answers that we got. So 44% of you said very important, and 11% said extremely important. So more than half are saying that it's important to the sales process, that is being liked. But we also wanted to know how important is it to be trusted by your customers or prospects in the sales process. And here we have higher numbers, and obviously trust wins, with 72% saying extremely important and 28% of you saying very important. So, you know, we hear a lot about building trust in being a trusted advisor in the sales process, but I think there's still that tendency to want to be liked. So let's really dig into why that's important and why there is a difference. So why does it matter? Here's why it matters. So there was a study that was published in Harvard Business Review a few years ago that noted that in a study of 450,000 sales reps, 89% of top sales performers do not feel the need to be liked. 88% though of the lowest sales performers say they need to be liked, and in fact, it is their greatest skill. So think about that. 89% of top performers do not feel the need to be liked. Doesn't mean that they're, you know, not nice or kind of jerks in the sales process. It just means that they're not out there to build that likability relationship, but 88% of the lowest performers say they do need to be liked, and it is in fact their greatest sales skill. Thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, this is an interesting statistic when you look at this, because, as we think about likability, clearly likability is important. I mean, if I was to ask each of you, how many of you have not bought something from someone simply because you didn't like the seller? We probably could all attest that we have not bought something. But if I was to ask you, if you were in a critical situation, let's say, heaven forbid, that you or a family member had a life-threatening condition, and you had the opportunity to meet with the world's foremost expert on this condition, how important would the likability factor be at that point in time? Likability always yields to trust, and people will buy from us for two reasons. Obviously, because they like us, but more importantly, because they trust us. And so we're going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about how do you kind of decipher and distill down a very nebulous concept, a very gray matter perspective of what trust is, and kind of get it to something that's more manageable so we can execute against it day over day.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, you think about how many times, you might even say, oh, I really like that person, but I don't necessarily trust them. So there is that huge difference there. All right, so let's dig into the content. I do want to mention, we always like to put a sponsor on our webinars, something that really relates back to the content. And today's program, or today's webinar, is sponsored by Impact Selling. Impact Selling, if you have not participated or been through that training or understand that sales process, is by its very nature designed to help the seller build trust with their customers and prospects. We do teach about trust and value. That is what you sell. And I remember Bill Brooks always saying, with trust, you can sell value. Without trust, you can only sell price. So if you're, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's an interesting point, because often sellers get confused between these two concepts, between price and value. The question I would have for each of you is, how many of you in your own lives, your personal lives, pay more for something you could pay less for? We all have those things. And that's because we trust in that value. And often the value is not about the product or the service. It's about peace of mind. It's about reliability. It's about expediency. So within the impact process, to Michelle's point, we help draw congruency between the construct of a customer's value formula and the value formula of our said offering, product, service, whatever it may be. Really just kind of objectifying a very subjective science, which is selling.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are interested in learning more about impact selling or any other resources that we may have relative to building trust with your customers, please feel free to email us at contact@thebrooksgroup.com. And producer Rich has put that in the chat box for you as well. And again, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A box for us as we go. So we've seen the data, so we understand that there is a difference between being liked and trusted, and it has an impact on sales results. But let's talk a little bit about the difference between being liked. So being liked, you're agreeable, you're enjoyable, your relationship is built on similarities or the charisma of the two of you. I like to also think about it as a seller, you may be more likely to tell the customer what you think they want to hear. We have, if you've seen our types of sellers, we have a profile we call the buddy seller. And the buddy seller is someone that builds their relationships based on that likability factor, right? It's all about that personal relationship. So they're more likely to sell with bringing donuts or muffins into the account, the golf outings, the football tickets, the marketing swag, that sort of thing. The difference is being trusted is someone that is consistent, that does the right thing, shares facts, even if it's painful, and that is incredibly critical right now. And it is a key building block of respect. And so there is a critical difference between these two.
It's interesting. Often we get asked about, what are the traits or characteristics of a trusted professional? And, I had a client several years ago ask me to help them kind of decipher and design, hey, listen, we want our sales folks to be viewed as the most trusted advisors out there in the business. How do we do that? And so, as you can imagine, I started thinking about all of the things that were necessary to establish and have enduring trust. And what I started to find was that the list just went on and on and on. And all of the things that I thought about and shared with my client were all absolutely indicative of trust. But the problem became it's hard to manage 200 or 250 attributes or characteristics. And so what I decided to do was I went out and conducted interviews. I kind of took the four walls of business out of it, went out and conducted interviews with over 1,000 people. And in those interviews, I asked them the same set of questions, and I moved it away from the perspective of work and asked them about trust. And I asked them, the people that you believe have the most trust of you in your life, tell me about these people. And I asked them the same set of questions. 3 things came out of every single respondent. Every single respondent reported 3 things that were absolutely imperative to trust. And I'll share those with you. 2 of them will seem pretty straightforward, but it was the third one. It was the third one that really differentiates our ability to earn trust. The first thing that people said, and think about the people that you trust in your life, people that we trust have to be credible. They have to tell us the truth. We don't trust people that lie to us. The second thing that people have to be is reliable. They have to be there when we need them. Now, the third thing was the one that kind of took me by surprise. The way that it was articulated. So we've got to be credible, we've got to be reliable. But the people we trust most put our wants and needs ahead of their own. And so if you think about doing those 3 things when you get out of bed in the morning, you think about coaching your sellers in terms of those 3 things, you will have a higher probability that you are engaging in a better probability of the trust relationship. Because again, it's a very nebulous thing. And sometimes doing what's right for somebody else and putting their wants and needs ahead of our own is telling that customer, hey, listen, this might not be the right time for us. We may not be the right fit. Because when we do that, we still maintain credibility. And without credibility, we really don't have anything.
I mean, I think that is such a huge aha, and it's an important takeaway. Sometimes, being in that trusted relationship means telling a customer no, or I'm not the right fit, or this supplier over here may be a better fit. And it's scary for salespeople, right? I mean, because that's like giving away business, or you feel like you're promoting another provider, but it really, truly is a great way to build trust, and it's telling them the truth. And then again, that just really solidifies that, I think, that relationship moving forward. So why is trust so important right now? And I think we kind of touched on this at the very beginning. It's kind of tough out there. Selling is hard. Right now, you may have inflation that you're dealing with. Your reps, or if you are a sales rep, you're having to go back to your customers and say, well, the price is now higher, or I can't meet this deadline, or we don't have enough product. And I think it's also having to adjust to the mindset of your customer. I was talking with a client earlier this week, and the clients that they sell to are really kind of shaking from the inflation and the economy news, right? So it's challenging those ideas, being willing to share bad news if something's not going to be available, or if you're not the best fit. And I think if the company falters, right? So if your company is not able to deliver, then that trusted relationship in the salesperson is even more critical. There are some things that are outside of your seller's controls, but they're the ones that have to deliver that news. And so the focus on problem solving, getting past that likability, but what's the best outcome and the best way to solve this problem for our customer?
Bailey has a question. Bailey asks, in addition to walking away from a sale, what else can we do to help the client understand that we're putting their needs first? And Bailey, it's a great question. I know I was guilty of this in my sales days, was that I would show up to meet with a customer or a prospect, and I would say, hey, how are things going? How's business? And they would say something like, well, my spouse won't talk to me, my car won't start, my son or daughter ran away, and my dog is sick. And I'd say, ooh, that's tough. So let me tell you about what I'm here to sell. And you know what? Shame on the customer, because they said, oh, okay, that's great. That's fine. And so I think what's imperative right now, especially in turbulent times, as Michelle had talked about, we've got to be able to empathize with the customer. And it's important to understand the difference in every sales process will always be and only be the seller. And so we have to create differential between ourselves and the competition. Before we can ever hope to be better, we first have to be different. And we become different by slowing down, resisting impulse to show up and talk about what it is we want to talk about. And when the customer tells us a business issue that they have, for example, listen, I'm having a hard time right now. I can't find people. Do we dive into that conversation? Do we ask them, what impact is that having on your business? What have you done to kind of combat that? Get a better understanding, and then maybe even research ideas and send them opportunities or perspectives that may be of value. They may not be of value, but what the customer knows is you heard what they were saying. And not only did you hear it, you responded to it. Will that of and within itself close you the deal? No, probably not. But it's those small degrees of separation between what you are doing and what the competition is doing that create all the difference. So really, a lot of this is blocking and tackling, going back to what we know to be imperative as sales folks, and not getting out ahead of ourselves. And remembering, as we talk about an impact, this is really about their wants and needs.
Yeah, great point. And I think those points are especially important when you're selling a commodity. So, if you're in an industry and you're selling something that is relatively a Me Too product, the skill and the trustworthiness of the seller can make a huge difference in the customer's decision process, right? Because the value that the seller brings, the trust, the advice, that can really set apart and make a difference, particularly when your product or service is less differentiated. And so, how do we increase trust? I think what Dan was saying is a great segue into these tips, right? So first of all, it's transparency. If you've joined us on previous webinars, we talk about transparency a lot, but being transparent, say what you mean what you say, keep your promises. If something's not going to be delivered on time, you need to tell the customer and get ahead of it. You don't wait for the customer to ask. So having that transparent relationship. And if you are a seller, or you have sellers who are more of the buddy seller type, the ones that are struggling with bad news or conflict or direct conversations, as sales leaders, practice these conversations, role play them, help your sellers get comfortable with this information and being able to deliver it. Next is consistency. So stick to a schedule, show up when expected, follow up when you say you will. It's a little thing, but it really does make a difference. Prioritize relationships. And so just like what Dan was asking, spend a few minutes to ask about the other person, because this reminds us that humanity comes first. And then also follow up on that, right? So ask the questions and then maybe dig a little bit deeper on there and not just switch to product. But again, ask about the individual, and then show empathy. Again, it's a tough time right now. There was a Harvard study published, I think actually back in the mid 2000s, and it talked about kind of the top 2 traits of sellers, and one of those was empathy. People want to be understood, and it doesn't mean that you have to agree. You don't have to show sympathy, but show empathy, kind of understand where they're coming from in the moment, and then listen. Again, these are blocking and tackling, just like Dan was saying. Engage your customers in conversations about their objectives and challenges, and find ways that you can help them and make their jobs easier. You should be talking as a seller about 30% of the time. Your clients should be talking 70% of the time.
And I think it's imperative as sellers that we don't sometimes put our blinders on and think about solely our function and our importance to sell. Clearly that's important. But I think sometimes it's important for us as sellers and as leaders to step back and say, listen, sure, we can be great salespeople, but before that, we need to be great business people. And so when you think about this, in up markets like we've experienced for the last few years, I tend to find that organizations are much more risk assertive. So they're more apt to take risks with new customers, new providers, new vendors, because the margin for error is not quite as small as it might be. But as things change, and as we see things kind of changing within the environment, inflation, as Michelle had mentioned, interest rates, some of those kind of things, what starts to happen is that organizations start to sometimes bear down. And if we haven't had the opportunity to build trust out ahead of that, it's much more difficult for us to be able to get not only the meetings, but secure orders, because companies are going to be more resistant because of fear of change. And so often, even if you have a better product or service, people will stay with what they have because they know it. And so if we're too late in trying to build trust, we're really behind the proverbial 8 ball when it comes to, engaging in downtime. So with trust, obviously, it's always better to have it and hopefully not need it, but it's always better to need it and have it at the same time.
So let's talk about post-meeting ways to build trust. So following up, providing information, memorable thank yous, and then useful information, a week to 2 weeks later. And again, I think this kind of goes back to Dan, what you were just talking about in terms of following up on, on issues that bubbled up during the conversation, even if it's not related to making a sale. And I think that follow-up, especially, especially when it is not necessarily related to a sale, is important. Staying top of mind and showing the customer that you were thinking of them.
Again, what are you doing that's different than the competition? And that obviously is important. Are we asking different questions? Are we building trust? To Michelle's point, are we following up differently? Are we creating memorable interactions? Because before we can be better, we've got to be different.
Yep. I know there's some salespeople that I have dealt with on purchases, and they send me the proposal, and then I don't hear from them, and then we get to the end of the month, and then all of a sudden I hear from them again, and there's not a lot of contact there in between. So and it does, to me as a buyer, then start to appear suspicious, like perhaps they don't have my best interest at heart, and it's really more about them and meeting their own goals. All right, so we're going to take questions. Please feel free to add questions into the Q&A, and we'll be glad to address those, any that you have. Let's go through the immediate best practices. So what's the takeaways from our time? So first of all, examine the true state of your customer relationships. So whether you're a seller, whether you're a sales leader, are those relationships based on likability or trust? And I work with a lot of organizations, helping them assess their teams and really figure out how to coach and improve their sales effectiveness. And I do find a lot of teams right now, especially that are challenged in our current environment, are doing so based on likability. And so understand, are you seeking to be liked, or are you seeking to be trusted? And if you're seeking to be trusted, are you implementing the right strategies? So highlight the greater importance of salesperson trustworthiness. So not just about likability, but amongst your teams, talk about trust, talk about ways to build trust, reinforce and coach to those aspects. Prepare and practice trustworthy habits and follow up consistency. So question that came in, I think without directly asking, what are ways that you can see a prospect or client trusts you or is beginning to trust you? I think you have to go through the context clues, right? So for instance, when you call, are you able to get through to that client? Do they pick up the phone when you call? Do they ask your opinion on issues other than their product or service? In Impact, we talk a lot about becoming a strategic resource or a trusted advisor. And we know salespeople who have built up such positioning within their accounts that their customers will call them for issues outside of their product, right? They know enough about the industry, they know enough about the client, that they're able to give advice. So those are some signs that they are willing and able to trust you. I think if they open up, if they start to reveal more information, if you have access at higher levels in the account, these are all cues that you have a trusted relationship either with that individual or with the account. Here is another one. Are there salespeople who make it an effort to be liked, which also damage trust, or is it just a lack of trust building? I think that there are ways that you can strive to be liked that also damage trust. So when you're talking about bad news, if you are dancing around the subject, if you are not being forthright and upfront, about a scenario, about a delivery, about an order, then that damages trust. And I think it's the fear of the seller wanting to be liked or fear that their customer will not like them that then causes them to do things that ultimately damage trust. Let's see, is it more beneficial to start the relationship based on likability and build into trust? Yeah, I think that trust is earned. And I've seen different articles and different research, and some say trust takes time, and some say you can start to build that trust right away. And I think it's more a little bit of both. So I think if you start with practicing trustworthy habits, then you go right into that trust building relationship. I think being very candid with your customers, I think being able to adapt to their style, being honest and upfront. We like to practice what we call a statement of intention. This is something that we teach in Impact. This is how you open a sales conversation. There's a way that you can add to that statement of intention that also kind of helps to lower their guard, right? So a statement of intention is what is going to happen on the sales call. The purpose of our call today is simply to find out a little bit more about the challenges that you're having and see if I can make some recommendations on a solution. You can add a sentence that says, if we find that we're not the best fit for you, I will be glad to let you know and possibly even recommend other providers that can. So things like that can also help to build trust along the way. All right. Other ways as well, as I'm thinking about this, other ways that you can even think to that help to build trust are things like sending an agenda in advance of your meeting, confirming your meeting. Again, it shows that credibility, it shows that professionalism, and then how you conduct yourself in your conversations as well start to add to that trust. All right. Well, we have come to the end of our time. I don't see any more questions coming in. If they are, feel free to pop those in. But I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank Dan Markin for joining us on short notice. We wish Russ safe travels. And we will be back on Friday, July 15th with another 30-minute webinar. We'll be talking about how to motivate your sales team when your company is struggling to deliver. And so until July, we want to thank you for joining us. If you have any additional questions, if you'd like more information on impact selling, if we could have a conversation about trust in your sales teams, please feel free to email us at contact@thebrooksgroup.com.